You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and with me as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, how are you doing, buddy?
You know what? I'm doing pretty darn well. The weather keeps getting better. Workouts going pretty well, although my darn cat won't let me sleep at night. He wants attention and cuddles and pets too much, so paw to the face a couple times a night, which is pretty annoying. But other than that, can't complain. I'm getting excited for the wedding coming up, and unfortunately, this Arizona versus Denver game is going to be, just an atrocity. But you know what? I can't complain too much. It's football, and college football is here, man. This is week 0, came and gone. Some ugly football there as well. I don't know if you caught the end of that Hawaii versus Arizona game. That was incredible. But that Florida-Miami game was just nasty football. But you know what? I'll take it. I think they had like 5 fumbles or something, and it was gross. But a lot of talent. Good to have football back, and the Hawks kick off this week, so excited for that.
Week 1 of college football is always kind of crazy.
Yeah.
You just never quite know what you're going to get. Same with the NFL. Some teams really try hard in the preseason to make sure that they're ready for the season. Others want to kind of ease into things. I always think the Patriots are one of those teams that they start like 1-3 and then finish the season 13-3. It just, everybody's like, oh man, that's a sign they're done. So yeah, I'm excited to kind of see some of these college football games, and it's good that it's all back, that games are starting to matter again. Not for the NFL quite yet, but it's getting close. We're almost there. So very, very exciting. And that's why you need to be following us on Twitter, because we love to talk anything football for sure. You can find me at Carl Dumler MHH, and of course Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. And you can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating, as we value your input. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head on over to milehighhuddle.com, a new affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media.
Fantasy football fans, listen up. Do you want to join the biggest NFL season-long tournament ever? Of course you do. If you love fantasy football, and we know that you do, then you need to enter the $3.5 million Best Ball Championship on draft. That's right. $3.5 million in real money. Frickin' huge. It's season long, but with no management. Just set the lineup and forget it. Once you're done drafting, that's it. No trades, no waiver wire. You don't even have to set your lineup. Your best players get automatically started each and every week, and you'll get the best score. Guaranteed. For a limited time only, you can get a free entry into the Best Ball Championship when you make your first deposit. But you have to use our promo code HUDDLE. That's right. A free shot at $1 million. Just by using our promo code HUDDLE when you make your first deposit on draft. Just search draft in the App Store or go to draft.com and come play for free with the promo code HUDDLE. Football's here, but if you love the game, it's even better when you're making money.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, Carl. Well, like we said, the Arizona versus Denver game is going to be, typically the week 4 preseason game is the worst one, but I think with the Broncos playing the Hall of Fame game, we may be, we got the football earlier. That's great. That's exciting. Champ Bailey, Pat Bowlen getting the Hall of Fame. But essentially what we saw last week against the Rams was what I typically expect to be that week 4 preseason game. And now we have to go through it another week. Man, I just, the heart is willing, but I don't know if the body is able. That kind of thing.
It is. It was one of the tougher games to watch for sure, especially when you have, we're going to talk about it here in a sec, but 2 quarterbacks that come in, and I thought the offensive line actually blocked pretty well for him, considering that these were the 2nd, 3rd, 4th string groups, and the offense to go out there and look so putrid, it was definitely tough to watch. There's a few plays that were fun. The 4th down stops were a lot of fun to watch this team do, and just showed some of the fight that these guys have when they're fighting for these last little bit of roster spots. But it's time for the real thing to be back. It's time to be able to watch these starters, and for this team right now, it's easy to see that a lot of these third and fourth string guys that especially aren't going to make this roster, but they're just not up to par with what you need.
Yeah.
It's hard to sit there and say, oh yeah, you've earned a roster spot when you're watching them going, you haven't earned one.
Yeah, the thing that's just, for me, when the quarterback play is so bad, it's hard to just even appreciate anybody else on the offense, you know? Like the weapons, the pass game. If the quarterback, the head of the snake, is, you know, outright just not a starting quality guy, or even a backup, first string backup, you know, the first guy in, backup quality guy, everything just looks so bad. I mean, you see that in college football too, but running these, like the college schemes are able to kind of get away with it because you have a little bit more of that spread scheme, simpler passing concepts, but you can't really do that in the NFL, and you have to have that legitimate guy, and when you don't have it, my God, is the product just fall off dramatically.
Right.
I mean, that's one reason I'm not a Colts fan by any means, but the NFL having one less great quarterback, one less franchise quarterback in Andrew Luck, everybody loses. Right? It's just the wide receivers aren't going to be doing as much. You know, the run game can't be opened up. It's just, ugh. And I love defense. I love trench play, but I'm not stupid. Quarterback makes the world go round. That's probably one reason I'm such a big pass rush enthusiast, is because you got to get after those guys.
Right.
But if you don't have it, then it's not great, and it's even worse when you have it, these level guys. So,
right.
You know, Kevin Hogan, Brett Rippon, you know, maybe there's something there. The tools are not great. You know, there's not a lot of natural arm talent or athleticism that you can get excited about with what I've seen so far, but it just makes the product not as good. And again, I kind of mentioned it, but, you know, pour one out for the Indianapolis Colts and Andrew Luck, man. That's sad to hear. You know, I respect the courage it took for him to do that. You know, that's really unpopular decision from the masses, but he's got to do what's best for him. So it's just selfishly, it's sad because the NFL loses another great player at the most important position.
I'm not sure we've ever seen in this league a top 5 quarterback retire in his prime.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been thinking about this since he retired. Has there ever been a situation where it was even close to this? And I just really can't think of one. I mean, closest I can come to is Calvin Johnson, because he was still in his prime.
Yeah, Barry Sanders too.
Yeah, but Barry was on the wrong side of 30 for a running back.
I thought he was 29.
I think he was 31.
Oh, okay. I remember reading that he was the same age as Luck, which is 29.
Okay, and maybe that's true. But, I mean, there's just a difference in, I mean, even if he was 29, you're kind of looking at maybe 2 more years of really high quality, where with Luck, you're looking at what, 6, 7, at least more years of being in his prime. And like I said, I mean, last year, they said it on the broadcast, the Broncos game, that if it wasn't for Mahomes, Luck probably would have been MVP of your league.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it is kind of crazy to see that. And like I said, it just hurts the product. I mean, look at the Broncos. Luck goes down with injury. How much do we really care about these preseason games not to be able to see him? At least with him, you're sitting there saying, okay, at least we get to watch maybe what the future is. That these are those precious snaps that he gets. But now that he's gone, you're going, I don't want to watch Hogan. I don't want to watch Rippon. And I mean, that's just, I hate to say that, but it is. It's just the whole product goes down very, very quickly when you don't have some of that promise of what you're trying to watch for. And so, I mean, it is. It's just, the season needs to get here. Yeah,
it really does. And, you know, luckily for the Broncos, they have, you know, talking about the importance of this quarterback, they have made an improvement, even if it is not a gigantic one, at quarterback in Joe Flacco. So that should make everything just a little bit better to watch, because, my gosh, the end of the Simeon era, if we can call it that, was hard to watch. And he even had healthy Emmanuel Sanders and still, you know, end of his prime, Demaryius Thomas to throw to. The offensive line was not great, don't get me wrong, but, man, quarterback is so important. That's one reason we harp on it so much. So, all right, well, we should probably get going here on the stock up and stock down. Typically, we're going to have a Scout's Eye preview episode for you this week, but guys, I'm going to be completely honest with you. The Arizona Cardinals' 4th and 5th round players string players, it would be a waste of your time and our time to really go through that, right? Like even the Rams game, we tried, but man, they're just these preseason games. They really need to go to open joint practices and 2 preseason games and call it good, or maybe even just 1 preseason game. They're not even using these things, right?
Right.
Like for the starters, and I don't know. It's people are getting hurt. It's not worth it. So this is more of an in general stock up, stock down. We have Carl. You're a little bit of a negative Nancy here. I see you have a 3 stock up and 3 stock down. Normally we've been doing 3 stock up and 2 stock down. So
I only put 2.
Okay.
I mistyped that. My bad.
Okay. No, it's okay.
I stayed positive.
Okay,
I'm
good.
not
We gotta
negative
come
Nancy
out plus
too bad.
1. Yeah.
My bad. But
the only time we can come negative is in my disc golf game.
Yes.
Or your golf game.
Yes. Which is, that's not been good. But anyway, to the actual game, there were some actual positive things to watch. And one of those guys, unfortunately, this is the way, I think John Gruden said it best, that you're here to kill another person's dream. You're here to be their nightmare. And Mike Purcell was Zach Kerr's nightmare. Him going out and having the game that he had, he was living in the backfield pretty much that entire game that he was on the field. And it just made it where, as much as I've really actually enjoyed watching Zach play, Mike Purcell's game just took it to a whole nother level. He looks like a guy that could be both a run and pass rusher for the Broncos. He's a guy that I think can play both nose tackle and defensive end if the Broncos need him to. And I just think that he's a perfect fit in this system. And so, he earned PFF's highest grade of the game. And we harp on PFF a lot, but this is one of those times where the grade lines up with what you saw on film. It's pretty easy to see when this guy's living in the backfield. He's got the long hair going, so it's easy to find him on the film. And he just had a great game. Kudos to him. Looks like he's probably going to make this roster unless he just absolutely has a terrible game on Thursday. But I was very, very impressed with his game.
Yeah, no, I agree. He was living in the backfield. Him and Jamarcus Walker were probably the 2 defensive line standouts in that game, but the Broncos didn't really, we've been kind of harping on it. Is Shelby Harris going to be that nose tackle? He's not a typical nose tackle, sub 300 pounds. Well, then you got Mike Purcell, right? He's looking like Damata Pecco out there with the hair and everything. I don't think he's wearing Pecco's number, but, they got that nose tackle. They got that 0 technique, 1 technique guy that can do some stuff there. And moving on from Kerr, that's a sign of things there. Kerr didn't really play that nose tackle position despite his body type. You think he would, but they have that guy there. Now they can kind of, if they really want to, first and goal, et cetera, the big personnel on defense. You got Mike Purcell in there who can do that, which, the nose tackle, not a real valued position, but it's still a guy that you like to have on that roster when you have 53 guys. So excited to have him. I thought he was having a pretty good game, although the Rams' depth on the offensive line is not good, to put it lightly. So, he's done. He did pretty well, and I'm excited to see him going forward, and he definitely feels like a guy who's you can write in and pen that's making this team. For me, the stock up, just overall preseason, Malik Reed, he's a guy that undrafted free agent, probably my undrafted free agent. I know he was a fan or had some fans on draft Twitter. He's a guy that, played some off ball, played some edge, but he's outlived my expectations, done even better than I thought. And I really love that they're calling him Dream Killer. Von Miller saying that he's killing QBs every other days and just wants to go out there and make plays. And he also reminds Von of Shaquille Barrett. So he's talented and he's still getting better, but, great pass rush. And the fact that they felt confident enough in him and his, pass rush ability and also underrated ability in coverage. He looks pretty, he's not incredible out there in space, but for a guy who's rushing the passer, that's pretty good in space. So excited to see him, and they felt comfortable enough with him to move on from Dakota Watson. So Malik Reed, cheap pass rusher, 3rd, 4th guy, backing up Von Miller there. That's going to be big shoes to fill. But coming in there as a rotational guy, you feel good about it, right? He's played so much better, so much quicker than I thought, and having a guy with his youth and contract and upside, balling out as an undrafted free agent, that makes the team that much better. So stock up for Reed, and I'm excited to see him this season. Granted, hopefully you don't see him too much because you want to have Von Miller and Bradley Chubb out there. But like I said, I've always said, and a lot of people have always said, you can never have enough pass rushers. So Malik Reed, stock up. I'm excited to see what he can continue to do this season, and if he can be that next undrafted free agent getting after the quarterback a la Shaquille Barrett.
Well, and I just think Dakota Watson was actually having a very good preseason.
Really good, yeah.
And so the fact that the Broncos feel comfortable enough to move on from him, I know they wanted some cap space, but you still don't make that kind of move for just that minimal cap space if you don't feel comfortable with the young guys being able to come in and play. And Malik Reed, Justin Hollins, both guys, I mean, you were going to talk about Justin Hollins. I don't want to talk about it too much, but the young guys have stepped up enough for the Broncos to go, wow, I think we got something here. And it's nice that they're going to have those guys around for a few years, that it's going to be some nice cheap options to go with Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. And it's just somehow they keep finding pass rushers. So very, very excited about that. But now that brings us to our Debbie Downer, our first stock down. And I mean, I'm going to put two players here together, but quarterback play. Hogan and Rippon both. It's one of those, I mean, Hogan has been given some pretty good opportunities here. And the fact that, I mean, if he could go out there and show that he's better than the rookie, that they should probably keep him as the backup and let the rookie develop for a year, he's going to make the roster. Well, he wasn't doing that. Locke had passed him. So it's looking like Hogan's going to miss the roster. Well, then Locke goes down with injury. So all of a sudden, Hogan gets this second opportunity to be able to make this roster. And what does he do? He goes out there and just looks so lost on the field. I don't know how many times I saw him do things that usually you only see rookies or second-year players do of when their first read is not open, just pull the ball down and take off running. Like I said, this last game, he actually had pretty good protection. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than what it's been. And it's still, he would panic. The second that first read wasn't open, I got to find a way to run. I got to go somewhere. And he just would almost run into the pressure. And it was just very, very frustrating to watch. So then you got Rippon, who has his best opportunity to really show, okay, this is, I know I'm a rookie, undrafted, whatever it may be, but I can beat out this Hogan guy. And then Rippon goes out there and makes a couple of nice passes to start out his time. And then it just went downhill from there. And so both guys just really missed a great opportunity. It just makes me question, can the Broncos be comfortable with either of them being the backup until Locke gets healthy? And it also makes me think there's no way that you can put Locke on IR. You want him back as soon as you possibly can. And you're hoping that it's going to be that second week of the season, third week of the season. So in case Flacco goes down, you're minimalizing how many chances you'd have to play Hogan or Rippon. But both guys, they blew their opportunity, in my opinion.
Yeah, Carl, you're right. The quarterbacks have not been very good. It's unfortunate with Drew Lock and everything. I mean, it really makes you just need to hope and pray that a guy like Joe Flacco will stay healthy this season. Because if he goes down and Locke isn't ready to go, I mean, it's a bad situation all around. But how many teams in the NFL actually do feel good about, their third and fourth string quarterback, right? Like it's the reason it's such a premium position.
Right. I did see something the other day that said that there are more premium quarterbacks than premium left tackles in the league, though. Daniel Jeremiah said that. Did he? Okay, I knew somebody had said it. I'm kind of going, he might actually be right. It does seem to be very, very difficult to find one. I think there's only one team in the league that I'd sit there and say has two, and that's the Eagles.
Yeah, I don't even know if I'd say that Jason Peters is elite anymore.
Well, it's hard to tell since he's been injured so much.
Yeah.
What he is, but I mean, healthy, he is an elite left tackle.
Honestly, I'm going to raise you the Eagles just because Jason Peters has been on the downswing, and I'll raise you the Saints. Teron Armstead and Ryan Ramczyk. I think that's the best bookends in the NFL right now. Armstead's very underrated.
I guess we just don't know what Ramczyk is as a left tackle.
Yeah, true, but we don't know.
If we're looking
Lane
at
Johnson, or are you talking about Andre Dillard? You're talking about multiple left tackles,
right? I'm talking multiple left tackles, like your backup. I mean, to find one, let alone two, is what I'm talking about here.
Okay. I understand now.
Okay. Just make sure we're on the same page there. But, I mean, the only big thing I have here with just the quarterbacks, with them being stocked down, and especially Drew Lock injured, how much does this hurt the Broncos from knowing whether Drew Lock can actually be the franchise quarterback or not with him missing this time?
I don't think he was the plan either way this season, so I'm not too worried about it that way. It's just missing those reps. Like, there's one thing that you can do it in practice, but preseason and this stage, going out there, letting him fail up, that kind of thing, get his confidence, get the play calling down, that's stuff that he's not going to get back. So I definitely think it pushes the clock back, but he's not a guy that probably is sitting on his bum either, playing Madden or Fortnite or whatever. So, I mean, granted, if he wants to play some, whatever, as long as he's doing his job.
Right.
But I'm not super worried about it. I don't think it's going to make a big difference when it comes down to it, other than the roster math. That's probably the biggest thing.
Right.
So we'll see. The stock down for me, the next stock down for me, he had a better game against the Rams than he did the 49ers, but I just haven't been super impressed with him, and that's Troy Fumagalli. They only spent a 5th-round pick on him, so just getting a depth tight end guy that can provide some snaps in there and some special teams, I mean, that's fine value. But I feel like they're going to need him more than I'm comfortable using him, if that makes sense. Tight end 3, that's fine. I'm fine with him as tight end 3. But I just, the injuries that we've already, Hireman is constantly injured. He's fine. I actually think Hireman's a fine tight end. He's not a great receiver, but you get him the ball underneath, he can make some guys miss. It's honest, the durability is the biggest thing. His blocking is really underrated. And then obviously Fant, another big thing, although Fant had a mild concussion last year and a hip contusion as well that limited him. So we got 2 injured guys up there, and then Fumagalli coming off the sports hernia. So there might be a time when they're relying on Fumagalli, and granted, that's much better than relying on Brian Parker and Matt Lacoste that we saw last season. But he's one of those guys, and I talked about this when we drafted him. Where does he fit as a tight end? Tight end's becoming a split position. You have guys that can do everything. Actually, we had Elway talking about it with Fant just, 2 weeks ago, saying that not only can he be a great F tight end, but he's showed so well as a blocker that we can envision him at Y. And F is I like to think of it as F stands for flex. So that's the tight end that you see like in motion, in the slot, kind of in the H-back kind of thing. And the Y is the typical extra offensive lineman, lead block kind of guy. If you know the Eagles personnel at all, I would say that looking at Ertz versus Goddard, Goddard's the Y. He's the big body guy. He's running up the seam. He's a pretty good athlete for a Y, but he's a Y. And then Ertz is that F, almost that closer to a slot receiver / H-back with the speed and the ability to uncover. So Fumagalli right now, he went to Wisconsin, but the narrative around him being a good blocker at Wisconsin, I just did not see it. I think he gets blown up at the point of attack too often. I don't see him, even on double teams, I just don't see a very strong jolt. And I don't think he has terrible technique. I just don't see the power there. And his frame, it looks like it's pretty well maxed out. He has kind of short legs, and I don't see great athleticism as more of that flex tight end either. So a jack of all traits, there's value for you at the tight end 3, but that's not really what you want. So stock down. I'd hope him to see a little more. Granted, he's essentially a rookie, and there's value there, but I don't know. There was hype on him. I think it was OTAs, like, oh, he's the best tight end out here. He's catching everything over the middle. And he does have soft hands. He can provide that, but I just wish that he was either a better athlete, whether it be down the seam or after the catch, or just a better blocker so that way you could rely on him more in line and blocking in that regard. And right now I just think he's kind of just not enough in either of those categories.
Right. No, I was actually about to say he's kind of that jack of all trades, but not really great at anything.
Yeah.
That's kind of where he's at in his career. And unfortunately, for the Broncos, like I said, for a number 3, that's not bad.
No.
If they're relying on him as the top tight end, it's still better than what the Broncos had last year when Hireman went down, but it's not so great that you're all that excited either. So it just, that's just something to keep in mind and keep watching as the Broncos go through this. But you're right. He hasn't shown what the hype was when OTAs and minicamp were going on. the pads went on, and it's easy to see that he has his struggles for sure. And I mean, the one thing that I'll say that he is at least known for being great is his hands. And even that here in the preseason, he struggled some with hauling in some passes. He had a great key third down play that was just designed for him and got to sit in the zone and dropped it. And so right there, it's frustrating. I mean, the whole tight end room is kind of frustrating. With Hireman injured, we haven't really got to see a lot of him. Noah Fant looked like he was finally starting to get things, but then he got hurt. Troy Fumagalli's not been great. Jake Butt finally gets on the field, and now can you really justify a roster spot for him?
I mean, just put him on the IR.
I would.
Give him the best chance. Don't put any pressure on him to come back. And if you need that money, then I guess move on from him. But I think he's a lottery ticket. He's always been a lottery ticket. And maybe it'll have late payoff. Maybe it won't work at all. But the results haven't been great. But the process, I don't think, was bad in selecting Jake Butt. So put him on IR. No rush. Buddy, we love you. We love your attitude. You're going to get a chance here. I mean, Hireman's probably gone after the season. And they're going to need tight ends. So put him on IR. No rush. We'll see you in a year. Don't push it too hard. Do what's best for you, and we'll come back. You'll get a shot. So that's what my mentality would be. So, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, but it's tough. That entire room, when guys seem to start showing a little bit of potential, they seem to get hurt. I mean, the Broncos have already lost Austin Fort, Bug Howard to IR from that position. So it's been very frustrating to see the Broncos not be able to get that tight end room completely figured out. And I mean, I'm hoping once the season starts, Hireman and Fant can both stay healthy and stay on the field, because those two, 1-2 punch, I think that has the potential to be really, really good this season. But it's just a matter of, is that really going to be the case for the entire year? So it is. It's kind of you're crossing your fingers hoping that they don't get hurt.
Yep, that's pretty much it.
All right, well, I'm going to go
now.
Yes, positive. So this is a guy I've been impressed with him this year. And I mean, we've dogged on him on this show, and deservedly so. I mean, let's just make sure we get that right. DeMarcus Walker, at one point, it was looking like there's no way he's going to remain on this roster. He played out of position his rookie year. I don't know what the coaching staff was thinking, and finally had to put on some weight last year, but hardly got on the field. And so then it was just kind of looking like this is another second-round bust for the Broncos. And I'm not saying that he's all of a sudden became this all-star player for the Broncos, but DeMarcus Walker has shown well in this preseason. He has been the guy that has really gotten into the backfield. His first step quickness looks better than it's ever been. He is using his hands like he's never used before. And in college, he was more known as a guy that didn't really win with his first step, but just won because he just never quit on a play. He always had the cleanup sacks. He was always that guy when the first and second target weren't open for a quarterback, DeMarcus Walker was there to greet the quarterback. Well, now he's looking like a guy that could actually get some inside pressure for the Broncos, could actually win early at the line of scrimmage, has actually shown decent as a run defender. That's something I never thought I'd say with Marcus Walker. And
it's still sorry to interrupt you, but it's winning with the quickness in that swim move and beating guys to that gap rather than anchoring and shedding.
Okay,
so he's got to do it in a certain way for his skill set and his body type, but he has flashed it, granted against second and third string offensive line, but he's flashed it. So you have to call it out, and just wanted to give a little bit of context to how he's doing it.
Right. And I mean, and that's for sure. You got to keep that in mind when you're going through this. But it's still, for a backup guy, I'll take it. For a guy that you're going to have maybe come in for 15, 20% of the snaps, 30% at tops, he can go out there and win those couple plays for you, get some negative plays on the field. And really that's what this defense is based on. If you can go out there and cause some big plays that get teams in not great situations, that's when this defense can be really deadly. And so I think DeMarcus Walker can play into that. I think there is a real role for him on this team. And I mean, the Broncos seem very surprised and happy with what he's doing this year.
Yeah, no, he's definitely, I mean, he's been a guy that hasn't lived up to the second round pick so far. And I don't know if he'll ever end up a starting caliber defensive lineman. Granted, you're almost seeing, again, we're talking about the tight end being dichotomized. Kind of same with the defensive line between your base package defensive lineman and your sub-package defensive lineman. And maybe you want a little bit more 3-down potential from a 51st overall pick? I think something like that. But, that's great. I think he's going to get a chance this year. And something of note as well is I think he's going to be another guy that's activated. I mean, he's been on this roster, but how many games has he been active so far? Not many. Probably, gosh, I don't have the number in front of me. It's got to be less than 10, though, right, in 2 seasons?
Yeah, probably.
So I'm thinking Draymond Jones is probably the guy you're going to see get the quote-unquote redshirt season and be the game day inactive, and which is fine. I mean, Draymond Jones has flashed, but he's had some issues in the run game. He needs a year in the weight room and kind of figuring out that kind of stuff. So that's okay. So yeah, I'm excited about Walker, and that's good. They're recouping something from that second round pick, and when you got guys like Von Miller and Bradley Chubb around you, and the defensive secondary that's starting to take place, you're going to get some one-on-ones, and you're going to get a chance to get after the passer, and man, hopefully he does, because he makes that defense that much better to get an interior guy who can get after there and win that B gap. So my stock up, I know that I already did Malik Reed, but I'm going to kind of double dip here on the rookie edge rushers, but this one's more of a hybrid. Justin Holland, 6'5", 250-pound, 4.5 40 guy, was the MVP of the Shrine Bowl this season. I think he's a player that had I think it was 5 sacks and 5 interceptions, which is a weird kind of stat to have, one of the only ones in the country to do that. And that versatility as that kind of overhang edge rusher who's also like a nickelback coverage linebacker, man, it almost might be becoming like an emerging position in the NFL. You know who's a guy who's really good at that for a really good defense?
Who's that?
Kyle Van Noy. I think
Van Noy. Yeah, it's Van Noy.
Okay, Van Noy. Okay, well,
yep.
There you go. That's me trying to be French. Kyle Van Noy. So he's kind of that guy.
French it up, son.
Yeah, right. No, this is football. This is American. Don't you speak American? But anyway, he's a guy that he's rushing off that edge, but it's really that kind of like hybrid player where it's that coverage ability, and is he coming off that spot? Is he going to drop into coverage? That kind of confusion, and that even that second can confuse the quarterback, offensive line, etc., and make a difference. And that's going into Fangio's system as well. Von Miller, Bradley Chubb, those guys are going to drop into coverage a fair amount. And it's all about just confusing the quarterback. How long is a typical play in the NFL? 3 seconds?
Right.
If it takes half a second more to process where that pressure is coming from, that can make all the world of a difference. That's a sixth of the play. So right. That kind of thing matters. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, did you read the article by ESPN about the 3 offensive coaches, McVay, LaFleur, and Shanahan?
I read what you put.
Okay. Well, they talked about there was 2 defenses, really. I mean, all 3 of them said Vic Fangio.
Yeah.
But they also talked about Belichick.
Mm-hmm.
And what those 2 really have in common is they both really go after those versatile players that you can do a lot of different things with. Because like you said, with quarterbacks today, with how fast the game is, you have to confuse them. You can't just sit there, what Vance Joseph has been doing. Our guys are going to play man coverage. We're going to send 4 every time. Every once in a while, we might throw a blitz in here just in case.
You just peer up, out talent them.
Right.
Backyard football kind of stuff.
Right, exactly. And I mean, you've listened to Chris Harris talk about it all year of just saying, that was so stupid. We kept telling the coaches, we can't keep doing this. They know exactly what we're doing. And I remember Del Rio did that when 2014, when he had all that talent. And then all of a sudden you have Wade Phillips come in and he knows how to use the talent. And so, again, guys like Justin Hollins, they're becoming more the type of players that you're looking for that can do multiple things on the defense, that can really, you can just move them around however you want them. I mean, even like Clowney. I mean, he's another one where the Texans have just moved that guy around like crazy to find better matchups for him. And so he's not just a pure pass rusher. He's not just a pure edge guy. He can come up the middle. He can do a lot of things to help in the run game. I mean, so again, you love those versatile players. and Justin Hollins has a chance to really develop into something. He's in a great situation here in Denver where he's not going to be asked to start day one, so he can learn the positions. He has great coaches that love to teach. I just think he is set up for success here in Denver.
I agree with you completely, and I think best case scenario, you don't really see him too much this season, given that it's going to take a little bit of time to get that physicality at the second level. We kind of hype on the run game not being as important in today's NFL. It's not. I mean, running backs aren't as important. The run game still matters. It's kind of a weird contradiction, but that's what the data shows. So he needs to show that he can tackle better, 6'5", break down in space, and also take on blockers, read his keys, fill in properly. So that's something that might take some time. But excited to see his usage, and given the lack of exciting young backer talent on this team from an athletic standpoint, he's a guy that gives a little bit of hope there for that off-ball position, especially as a hybrid guy. I mean, just really fun. So we were talking about in the last podcast how his ability to play edge and that off-ball spot really just gives them, not only from a game-to-game and scheme perspective, some versatility, but filling out the depth chart. So that's great as well. So I'm excited about Hollins. Good player, upside, and I mean, man, Von Elway keeps on doing a pretty good job with getting some of these defensive players. So getting a guy like that in the 5th round, man, arrow's trending up there. I'm excited. Hopefully special teams this year is the big thing for him. But going forward, who knows, man? He's a ball of clay, and Vic Fangio is probably one of the better artists when it comes to sculpting linebackers. So excited about that. All right, well, we still have some more stock up and stock down guys to get to here, talking about just general preseason heading into the season. Obviously not talking too much about the starters because, gosh, what do they play? 50 snaps, 40 snaps, something like that? Maybe not even a half worth of football. I don't know. It wasn't a lot. And even then, the scheme is so vanilla that it's hard to take too much away. But we'll be right back, guys. Stay tuned, and we're going to talk some more Denver Broncos.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on Building the Broncos. I am Nick along with Carl, and we're going to continue on the stock up and stock down. Carl, I'm going to go stock down here we've been doing 3 stocks up and 2 stocks down just to be positive, but the big concern for me, stock down in general, and it's not totally the play on the field, but it's also injuries. It's got to be linebacker. Todd Davis, it sounds like he's not going to be ready for week 1, and it sounds like it's a lingering issue, so, man, when are we going to see him? Week 2? Week 3, and even then, he's missed all of preseason, and as much as we clown on preseason, they're installing a defense right now. So Todd Davis, hard worker, smart guy. I'm sure he's in there getting the mental reps, but he's still not out there working on the chemistry from the safeties to the cornerbacks to Josie Jewell or whoever's playing next to him at linebacker. So a little bit concerned there. Joseph Jones, the most athletic linebacker, lost pretty much first snap he played this season, torn tricep, probably might not make the roster, but might be a guy that comes back later. We'll see. Might be IR'd. And now he got an injury with Josie Jewell as well. That had that oblique strain. He played in the San Francisco game, though. Did not look great. So I got concerns in general the linebacker room. Keyshawn Bierria is probably a guy that, if this linebacker room was league average, doesn't make the squad. And Alexander Johnson, while he looks like he's going to be fine in his niche role, still a limited player as far as the speed and coverage ability. So off-ball linebacker, like we talked about in the past, if there's one position that I'm okay with the Broncos being okay at, average at, on defense, if we're talking defensive line, linebackers, defensive backs, it's linebackers. They're easier to cover up for, but it does seem like that is going to be a potential Achilles heel for this team this year, and the likes of running backs and tight ends will still be a problem in the pass game.
So just something I was reading earlier today. They were talking about DVOA and different coverage, how teams did against each kind of coverage. Do you want to know what the Bears struggled with the most last year?
I'm going to go with 21.
I'm talking like route running.
What type of route specifically?
Right.
Wheel route?
The slant.
The slant. Interesting.
They were great on anything to the outside. They struggled with anything to the inside.
Well, that's not what you want. But there could be worse.
And well, I mean, and it sets up. You think about the teams that you play, like the probably the offense the Bears struggled with the most was the Patriots last year. Well, where did they like to attack? The middle of the field. And so I think it's just a little bit of just how the defense is set up itself. I don't think it's a talent thing. I think it's just every defense is going to have their weaknesses. They're going to have their places that you attack. Like the Legion of Boom. The place to attack was in between the corner and the safety on the outside. When they were playing that zone where you had a running back run out to the flat, and then the safety, before they could get over to their spot, you try to hit the wide receiver in that spot. That was the bread and butter of trying to defeat that defense. And so, like I said, every defense is going to have their weaknesses. And for the Broncos, I think that's going to be an area that you're going to have to keep an eye on, of just how teams try to attack the middle of the defense. I do think that they have a lot of athleticism, especially at the safety position, that can help out. They do have the slot cornerback market pretty much covered. I don't think any team has better slot corners than the Broncos.
Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, when you're about 3 deep at slot corner, that's pretty impressive. But so yeah, it'll just be interesting how that all plays out on some of that. Just kind of something to keep an eye on. But you're right. The linebacker room is one that it's not talent-wise, it's not to the level that you would like. I mean, injury-wise, it's not where he would like it to be. And so it's just kind of unfortunately, the Broncos have been hurt at 2 positions, tight end and linebacker. Like all other positions, they've had hardly any injuries, little nicks and bruises here and there. But those 2 positions, it seems like everybody's gone down at some point. So it just something to keep an eye on. It's definitely a position for the Broncos to be looking at to improve for next year for sure. I mean, I like Todd Davis. I think he's better than most people think. But he and Josie Jewell are both replaceable players.
I do not disagree. Well, who's your next stock down so we don't be too negative here? The final stock down.
Okay, so this is one just a little bit of frustration on my end of just watching this guy, Elijah Wilkinson. He had an opportunity 2 games ago to really kind of get his name back into the hat for the left tackle position. I mean, Garrett Bowles goes out there and has a terrible game, and Elijah Wilkinson goes in, has a terrible game. And then it sounds like Leary, they're a little bit worried about whether he's going to be fully ready, how long he can go. And so Elijah Wilkinson got a chance this last week to substitute in there for that right guard spot. And again, he had his struggles. He was good in the run game, I'll give him that. But against the pass, he still had times where he didn't set his base very well. He didn't quite know where the players were coming from. It's almost like a lot of his issues are communication issues. Because the lock injury, when that one happened, that was Elijah Wilkinson pretty much just letting his guy go right by him. I think he thought he had more help to the outside and went inside, and then all of a sudden he went, oh man, this guy's running right by me. That was probably my guy. And then again, this past week when Rippon got hit, Wilkinson just got beat big time, and it looked like he was planning on trying to help the tackle and didn't realize that he was supposed to be helping to the inside. And so I just wonder if that's a little bit of his issue, some of the communication. But beyond that, he still has some problems moving his feet, still has some problems getting his punch timed out. And for the guy that's supposed to be your first guy in, and the guy that was talked about by the coaches like crazy earlier in training camp, he just hasn't shown it to me.
I miss you, Billy Turner.
There's a reason that he got paid big time.
Yeah, man. He's a great 6th lineman. Can play every position but center. Yeah, he was a good for us last year. I feel like people didn't appreciate him enough. But again, Packers paid him good money.
Right.
So good for them. He deserved it. Good for him too. 3rd round pick that was cast off by the Dolphins, trash organization, tends to do that. And then Broncos scooped him up, and man, he really thrived in Denver. So hoping for the best for him. I really enjoyed his game. All right, well, last stock up for me, and it's because this guy didn't play a snap for the Broncos in his 3rd game, or 4th game, I guess. Week 3, game 4. It's confusing. Oh, man, I'm done with that. The Devontae Booker. a guy who, when the Broncos brought in Theo Riddick, a lot of people were ready to dump off. And make no mistake about it, if things are going well for the Broncos, Booker is not seeing much action, but they need him. He's probably going to be the kick returner. And he can do a little bit of everything. Run between the tackles when the offensive line isn't absolutely trash, which I think that 2016 team had the worst Broncos offensive line I've ever seen. Besides Russell Okung, he was pretty much the only one who was at all competent there. Paradis was maybe a Paradis rookie's season. I think he was coming into his own then. But yeah, that's not a great line. But Booker, he can do that. He can okay speed. He can get out there. But really, it's the passing game stuff that he can do. Not to the extent that Theo Riddick can, but he can run some routes. He can catch the ball. He can pass protect. So Booker, because he didn't play anything, doesn't seem like they're dangling him out there for trade bait. Maybe if Theo Riddick had stayed healthy, things would be different. But Booker's on this team to stay for now. So stock up for me.
Yeah, good choice. Easy to see that he's making this roster right now. My last one, Juwan Winfrey. I mean, he's really cemented himself, for sure, at least as wide receiver 5. He could make a claim for wide receiver 4. I mean, Tim Patrick, we haven't seen him do a whole lot here in the preseason and the games. I've heard good things about him in practice, and he's obviously got the experience over Winfrey, but I wouldn't be shocked if Winfrey, by at least week 4 or 5 of this season, is the 4th receiver in. If the Broncos get to that point, or if there's an injury to Sanders or to Sutton, it really wouldn't surprise me if Winfrey is the guy that comes in later in the season.
Instead of Patrick?
Yep.
It's possible. He definitely has, I would say he has more fluidity to his game. Patrick is I don't know. We'll see about Patrick. I really do like Patrick as far as the speed and stuff, but I just need to see more nuance from him as far as separating and the fluidity. He doesn't always play with the loosest hips, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Probably does to you being a wide receiver guy. That's something I really like about Jalen Reagor compared to Henry Ruggs. Is that Ruggs obviously the really straight line guy, but man, Reagor just looks like a joystick out there with that speed too. So
yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to take one more quick break here. Guys, we'll be back to talk Daniel Jeremiah's championship building theory as it pertains to the Denver Broncos. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast. I am Nick alongside Carl, and we're going to talk some championship roster building. And a pretty cool theory came out recently. I remember seeing it last year from Daniel Jeremiah as far as roster building. And he has a checklist of every team's roster, what they need. Obviously, this isn't an end-all, be-all. There's some nuance there that's allowed. But he has a checklist that a team needs if they are going to contend for a Super Bowl in today's NFL. So I will read it to you guys from offense to defense and tell you how many of these players as well. So the number one guy on this list, obviously, franchise quarterback. Gotta have him, unless you have an all-time defense or like a really good overall team around him with a great coaching scheme. Looking at Nick Foles and that Eagles team, then you really need a franchise quarterback to contend for a Super Bowl. Next up, offensive playmakers. He has 3 written down here. Could be wide receiver, running back, or tight end, but need guys that can help create space and do things with the ball in their hand and get open and make explosive plays. Next, 3 quality offensive linemen. Doesn't matter if it's left tackle, right tackle, center, guard, left guard. You need 3 guys that are good, that can solidify the unit. On the defense, he has 2 pass rushers, so defensive line, whether it be interior or edge rushers. So for your old school kind of heads out there, instead of classifying as edge or interior, your outside linebackers for the Broncos scheme, as well as your defensive ends, and potentially your nose tackle as well, Shelby Harris, even though I think that terminology probably needs to start being just eased out. And then finally, 3 defensive playmakers on the back 7. So linebacker, cornerback, safety. You need 3 guys back there that can make game-changing plays and help cover up for league average players around them. Obviously, you can't have a team full of all-pro players. Can't have a team even of Pro Bowl players. But you got to have those really good studs in there. And all these guys don't have to be Pro Bowl players either, but building blocks on the roster to help solidify your team and build a contender. So, Carl, I got to ask, anything here that you agree with, disagree with, or does this look good? Would you write this in pen, or would you protest a little bit in some areas?
Oh, I would protest a little bit. Just a couple things here. I think that, let's say, instead of 2 pass rushers, you got 4. I think you can cover up a lot of that needing those 3 defensive playmakers in the secondary. Or if you have that quality offensive line, I think you can get away with maybe 1 less offensive playmaker. So I think the numbers can kind of move back and forth just a little bit. I mean, if you have one unit that's absolutely elite, it can make up a difference. I mean, I think of Seattle. Really, when they were winning, I don't know if you would consider that they had 3 offensive playmakers when they won the Super Bowl.
They had 2.
They had Lynch.
I know Percy Harvin killed us. Explosive plays.
But
inconsistent. But, I mean, you still had to account for him.
He's more of a special teams playmaker.
Yeah. Okay. I think he had some end arounds and stuff too, and quick pass stuff that Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie wanted nothing to do with.
That's true.
Again, all-time defense.
Right. And so, I mean, it's just a little bit of, like I said, you can play with the numbers a little bit, in my opinion, especially if you have just that amazing front four. There's a lot of things you can do. I think of like the Giants when they won the Super Bowl against the Patriots. They just had a great defensive line that could really get that pressure on Brady. He's one of those guys, if he doesn't have a pocket to step into, he really struggles. I mean, that's what the Broncos did in 2015 when they beat them twice. Both times, he was just really struggling with that pressure in his face. And so, again, that's just, especially against those kind of quarterbacks, the pocket passers. Now, it changes a little bit when you get into like the Cam Newtons or the Patrick Mahomes, because then you need some coverage guys that can hold up if your defensive line misses that first sack.
And they can't pin their ears back as much.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, obviously, I think the biggest one for me would allow a little bit more nuance on the defensive side, whether you have 3 great pass rushers and 2 defensive playmakers in the back, or even 4 great defensive playmakers in the back 7 and 1 pass rusher. So I think you can kind of have a flex guy there, so to speak, if we're going to talk a little fantasy football language. But I agree with you for the most part. So I guess now we'll look at the Broncos as this pertains to this checklist for building a contender. And got to start off quarterback. Do the Broncos have a franchise quarterback, Carl, this season?
Yes and no. I mean, it just Flacco's good enough to not destroy a team. And, I mean, there's been a lot of years there when he has good coaching, when he has pretty good players around him, the team can have success. I mean, Joe Flacco's smart enough not to go ruin a game for you most of the time. And he can make a couple plays here and there, and he seems to show up when the playoffs show up. I mean, I got to give it to the guy when it seems like the team is down, he seems to rise up. And so I'm not going to call him a franchise quarterback because, I mean, you can already see the Broncos are already still working to replace him when they use a second-round pick on Drew Lock. So for this season, not really. I mean, I think he's good enough to help get them to the playoffs. I'll say that much.
If you put a league average coach and league average players around him, how many wins does that team get?
8 or 9.
So I was thinking 6 or 7.
Okay.
I mean, he has a great defense with him, and he's pretty much had a great defense with him his whole career. And John Harbaugh is one of the 5 best coaches in the game. Like, if you're ranking him, right, he's closer to 25 than he is top 10.
Right. I just look at he's only had 1 losing season his entire career.
Yeah, but wins are a team stat.
And I get that.
Unfortunately.
I get that.
Not unfortunately. But
like I said, he's one of those guys, he doesn't go and lose you a whole lot of games.
Yeah.
And so that's why they can go out there and still be 10-6, 8-8, 9-7, even when the team is not outstanding.
Yep, I don't disagree. I guess bringing it back to Daniel Jeremiah, a lot of things I like to talk about as far as quarterback is, especially with Dak Prescott's whole contract situation, is that quarterback a truck or is he a trailer? Is he the dude who makes everything run? He can pull those guys along and make everybody better? Or is he just the one who sits there and the system and the players around him and the coaching staff, he's a compliment to him, but he's not the dude that's the driving force. Right?
Yeah, I mean, And I guess in that sense, there's not many quarterbacks that I would say qualify as the truck. I mean, that's why it's so hard to find that position. It's why every team's looking for him. And I mean, even some guys that can put up some pretty big numbers. I mean, you're still looking at their overall records, their overall team, and how they're doing. And there's just not a lot of quarterbacks out there. I think of like, even Drew Brees had those few years where his team kept going 7-9, even though he's putting up big stats.
Yeah.
Matthew Stafford. I love Matthew Stafford. But he's not a guy that can absolutely raise his team where you just sat there like Peyton Manning. You penciled in 12-4 at least every year. It didn't matter.
He's the boat. If Brady's the goat, Peyton's the boat for the best of all time. Right.
I mean, but it's just you didn't even look at the rest of the Colts team. All you had to do was say Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
Even with the Broncos, the same thing where, I mean, that 2013 defense was downright terrible because of injuries. But they still were obviously just an outstanding team. Yes, he went out, had a historic season. And obviously he had to put up that kind of numbers because the defense was so bad. But again, you just look at a guy that can carry them. I look at Patrick Mahomes as a guy that can carry a bad team. I thought Andrew Luck was pretty good at carrying a bad team. Tom Brady, obviously. But even Aaron Rodgers last year struggled.
Yeah. How healthy was he?
That's
and again, are you going to say I'm still talking about having an average team around him?
Right.
Because Matt Stafford had an average team around him.
Below average most years.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, so I don't know. We'll see. We're getting long. We probably should keep moving it. But yeah, the big question really comes down to is Drew Lock the guy? I don't think this is a Super Bowl team, guys. Maybe the playoffs. Probably more closer to 500. So it comes down to if Drew Lock is the guy or not for me in the end. So we'll see.
You and I've talked about this. That there's three ways that the Broncos could have what's considered a successful season. If they make the playoffs, if Vic Fangio proves that he is the coach of the future, or if Drew Lock shows that he's the quarterback of the future. Any of those three happen, I think you can consider this season a success for the Broncos.
All three.
Well,
Flacco
all three
goes down, Fangio kills it, and Lock leads his team to the Super Bowl. And then I wake up from my dream. And then I turn off the Xbox.
Now who's the eternal optimist here?
I had to balance it because too many people turn it off after I was being negative. So now we're on to the offensive playmakers. You have written down here, I agree with you. Emmanuel Sanders is one. However, that is just for the season. So they're going to need to find a wide receiver that can be that guy. Is it Sutton? Is it Hamilton? Is it Winfrey? So far, I'd say no. I'd say those are more complementary guys to a better playmaker. But we'll see. They're just second-year players and first-year player for Winfrey. Maybe Patrick, too. I think he's a tier below those guys, but he's got value to this team still. And then you have Phillip Lindsay. I do wish that he was a better player in the pass game. I mean, we're going to hammer this home all season, but there's just only so much value a player can bring, specifically as a running back. But if you can complement that running ability with passing ability, I'm not just talking dump-offs. I'm talking being flexed out, running wheels, running good routes, getting separation, and being that pass weapon. There's real value to that. So that's one thing. I'd give Lindsay, 3/4 or something, maybe a half, but 3/4. He's got to provide that pass game boost as well. And then Noah Fant, maybe, but that's depending or projecting something that hasn't shown yet. So pass weapons, I do like that Noah Fant and Phil Lindsay are young. That's great. But I think going forward, they are going to have to find another guy.
Yeah, I mean, and this was my biggest worry about Phillip Lindsay. I mentioned it when I went to camp that he had a lot of drops. I don't have any worries about him in the screen game or things like that. But like you said, you need a running back that can make a team have to game plan and watch him come out of the backfield. The Broncos need to be able to motion him out and make a defense have to say, oh, no, this guy's out here. And he's just not that right now. And this is especially with losing Riddick right now. I don't know when he's going to be back. Hopefully by week 2, 3, 4, somewhere in there. But until he gets back, that's a huge loss for the Broncos if they can't have that passing weapon at a running back position. And then, like I said, Noah Fant, I mean, athletically, the profile, you sit there and say this guy should be able to do something. But there's been plenty of athletic tight ends that have come into the league and done nothing. and others that it took a long time to really adjust and actually be able to do what they need to do on the field. There's just such a difference in what teams can do to try to cover a tight end in the NFL compared to college. The windows get tighter. You got to have good hands in traffic. You just don't have the 6'5", 250 guy that can run a 4.5 going against a 6 foot, 230 pound linebacker that only runs a 4.9.
Yeah.
So
linebacker and coverage, biggest mismatch in NFL.
Right. So yeah, we'll just have to kind of see if the Broncos have this or not. That's kind of the big thing when you look at this Broncos roster. They do actually have quite a bit of youth. I mean, you got a mix of like Derek Wolfe, Von Miller, Chris Harris, Kareem Jackson on defense, but especially offensively, other than Leary and Flacco, the rest of the group is really, really young. And so, Sanders. Sorry, I forgot Sanders. Oh my gosh. Sorry, Sanders. But no, I mean, the rest of them, it's pretty young. And so it's a lot of what if questions when it comes to the Broncos with those guys.
And even more on the what if side, the offensive line. Brandon Thorne was high on the line. I mean, it still has a chance to be pretty good. I saw Matt McChesney send out a tweet saying McGovern's on the up and up, especially if he gets those snaps down. I mean, he can be average to above average. He's not going to be elite at center, I don't think, but I think he can be solid there. I've always thought he projected there, and he's definitely a hard worker. That's something that I really enjoy, and the strength is there and everything like that. Reisner has shown about as well as anybody could hope this early on. And Leary, if healthy, can be pretty solid too. So I think Reisner specifically is a guy that you can count as one of the 3 solid offensive linemen. But who knows with Garrett Bowles? Does he want it? Does he have it in between the ears or in his rib cage? I've been a proponent of being patient with Bowles, and some of the rumors surrounding him, I feel betrayed. I feel like I've been made a fool of Bowles because I stood up for you. So I'm a little bit overcorrecting and hard on him now, but the stuff I've heard is not ideal. And Leary injury, so not sure yet. And then Juwan James, I think definitely better potential there. So I'd say 1.5 right now, with Reisner being the solid 1, as crazy as that sounds for a guy who hasn't even played a regular season snap yet, and James being that half. But I think there's some hope still yet for McGovern as well, but he's going to be a free agent, so we'll see.
Right.
I'd go 1.5 right now.
Right.
Solid on Reisner. We'll see on James.
And Leary, like you said, if he's healthy, he is a very, very solid offensive lineman for the Broncos. And so you really do have the potential for 3 guys, maybe 4, to be really, really solid. But right now, you can't say with any of them for sure. I mean, like I said, Reisner is probably that one guy you're going, I can feel pretty comfortable with him, but he's a rookie. So it's still, even up there, it's up in the air. And even against San Francisco, he struggled a little bit with better talent. So I'm interested to see how this unit comes together. It hasn't looked good so far, but that doesn't mean it can't still develop into a great unit. They have a great coach in Munchak. I mean, that's a given. And I think they have a good quarterback that knows how to maneuver in the pocket pretty well. He's not athletic, but he's shown an ability to move in the pocket. I mean, he showed it in the last game that he played. There was the play, I think it was the 3rd down where he passed it to Hamilton. Stepped up in the pocket, saw the room to be able to move, and made a nice play. So it's a work in progress for sure.
All right, and now on the defensive side, the Broncos, 2 pass rushers. I don't know, do they?
Remains to be seen.
Yeah, they really need to prove it.
I think the bigger question for them is, do they have 3 or 4? I mean,
that's the real question. I'd say 2.5 is the conservative bet right now, but there's a chance that it could be 3. 4, I'm really not ready to go there. Well, we're talking about like great players, like not complimentary pass rush or guys like that. I'm talking about like guys who are vying for the Pro Bowl.
Right. I guess it's more, I'm looking at the whole of the entire unit for getting after the quarterback. And I'm sitting there saying, teams are going to focus on Von Miller. Teams are going to focus on Bradley Chubb. And so everybody else is going to have one-on-one matchups. I know Shelby Harris can win one-on-one. DeMarcus Walker showing a little bit more of what he can do one-on-one. Draymond Jones, we'll kind of see how he develops or if he gets any time. Adam Gotsis has had some moments, not many. And Derek Wolfe.
Solid.
Yeah, solid. So, I mean, when you combine
Consistent.
all those guys together, do they equal one more? Do you see the rest of those guys?
I think you're assuming for like average players. It's like when you talk baseball and you're talking WAR. It's like wins above replacement. A lot of these guys are just those rotational filler types that come and go. And, there'll be some of them that are fan favorites, but really they just kind of just get rotated along. So we'll see there. We will see there. I would definitely think, though, that Shelby Harris deserves to be in this conversation. That's the guy who I have circled this year, and he's shown well in limited snaps. It's a new defense. We'll see what happens this year, but Shelby Harris is the one that could really emerge there, in my opinion.
Yeah. I guess it's just the stat I'm thinking about is just how many sacks or pressures can this entire defense get together. If you're thinking of Miller and Chubb getting 30 sacks together, 15-15, that seems that's about what they had last year combined together. And so then you're looking at the rest of the defense. Can they get that 12 to 15 sacks combined between the rest of them?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I'm really excited about this. I think the Broncos have at least 2.5. Chubb and Vaughn are established studs, building blocks. Shelby Harris is trending that way. Hopefully, he does it so great that he prices himself out of Denver. So we'll see there. And then the back seven, I have hope for a guy like Kareem Jackson and Justin Simmons, but really the only guy I feel solid writing in pen as that playmaker in the back end is Chris Harris right now. And I do like the depth of the defensive backfield. I think it's going to be very good. I mean, even the two deeps we're talking, Callahan, if you're just going base, Callahan, Chris Harris Jr., Kareem Jackson, Justin Simmons, I feel pretty good about that. But each of their backups, pretty solid as well. Yadam, Bosby, Parks, and I'm assuming Cravens as well. So I feel really good about the depth, but as far as real playmakers there, it's only Chris Harris Jr., in my opinion, right now. Yet to be seen with Jackson moving to the safety role. Yet to be seen with Simmons coming off a down year. Optimistic for those back two. Would rather have a stud cornerback from Chris Harris Jr., a pure boundary guy, kind of in that Talib mold, but you can't make an all-pro roster every season. There's 32 teams, but
right.
Yeah, we'll see. I think that if we're talking just this structure-wise, though, right now the only one I feel confident saying is Chris Harris Jr.
No, I'm with you. But like you said, just the depth of this unit is very, very impressive. Consider last year where the Broncos were struggling so much, they tried to move Simmons almost to more of a cornerback position. And now you look at, if any of these guys go down with injury, you still feel pretty good about their backups. Part of me sits here and says, our backups for the Broncos, I almost think the Chiefs would take them as their starters. If for an entire unit, if you compare the whole backup unit compared to their starting unit, I know that they have the Honey Badger.
And Juwan Thornhill's been balling out.
Right. I'm not trying to take too much away from them, but it just... Yeah. You look at the weakness of that Chiefs team, and I look at the strength of just having this secondary that you feel really, really good about a lot of these guys. Yadam and Bosby have both shown really well this preseason. Callahan, we already know that he's a perfect fit for this system, has thrived really well under Fangio. Justin Simmons has been having just an outstanding preseason and training camp. Chris Harris, I think probably the guy that's going to be most excited about this defense is Chris Harris, just because it gets to play to his strengths of being such an intelligent guy.
Yeah, I agree. So I guess rounding this out, if you'd agree with me here, the checklist, the Broncos do not have that franchise quarterback right now for 2020. The future, maybe. Yes? No? Yay, nay?
We'll see.
Man, you're going to go with Flacco as a franchise guy?
No.
Okay. You're talking. So it's the maybe for the future, but the no for 2020 or 2019.
Yeah. So 2019, I don't think Joe Flacco is the guy that's leading us to a Super Bowl by any means. So, if you're considering a franchise quarterback being the guy that you think can take you to a Super Bowl, no. I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't think I'm going to be. I have to wait on Drew Lock. We really hope that he develops. I mean, that'll answer so many questions for this team. I mean, it makes everything else on this list that much easier. But right now, you can't say with any kind of confidence that Drew Lock is that guy.
Yep. So it's a maybe, but definitely a no for Flacco. Offensive playmakers. We have about 2, maybe 3 for this season, but maybe even 2.5 or something because Lindsey's lack of pass game contribution. But it really, in the future, Sanders probably last season, that makes it a big question mark there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a unit that they're really working to rebuild. The Broncos got really fortunate having Sanders and DT for so many years together, and even before that, DT and Decker. And so now they're kind of going, okay, well, now we got to get young. We've had Sanders, we've been able to rely on him for a long time, and they just haven't been able to find that other receiver to complement him or to really step in and become that next number one for him.
Yeah, running out there with 2 number ones for a number of years. And Peyton Manning's great, but having DT and Emmanuel Sanders, oof, man, that's a good look. Offensive line, it could be 0 out of 3, but I feel confident in saying at least 1 of 3, maybe 2 of 3 at this point with Reisner and James.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give it to James. I mean, He's shown enough in his time. I want to go ahead and give it to him. I know he struggled with some injuries, and he's been struggling with injuries since he came to Denver. But talent-wise, he is one. And Reisner, like I said, I think he's shown enough, at least to me, to be number 2. So I'm going to give it to those 2, and then hope that we got 1 more out of the other 3.
Okay, pass rush 2 out of 2, maybe even 3 out of 2.
Yep, can't disagree.
And then back 7, 1 out of 3, maybe 2 out of 3, maybe 3 out of 3, depending on those safeties.
Right. I mean, I do feel pretty good with Jackson. I mean, he's been around for enough. I mean, he's a good but not great player, I guess you could say. But I do want to see him in this defense.
In this role. It's a different role.
Right. And I just think he is one of those guys, again, just like Justin Simmons, I think those 2 can just go out there and really blow some people away this year.
Yeah, I'm excited about those 2, indeed. Do wish they had 1 more great cornerback to kick everybody down, 1 on the depth chart there, and maybe 1 great linebacker as well, but that's getting really greedy. If you do that, I mean, if you put in a Pro Bowl level linebacker and another Pro Bowl level cornerback, I mean, we're talking about easily the best defense in the NFL.
Well, I mean, oh yeah. I mean, that could be one. You could be talking rivaling that 2015 defense.
Yep. I mean, really. So we'll see. But that'll wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Kendell MHH. Make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and a comment, as your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.